Jake Morrison pressed his face against the cold metal of the observation window and watched his home planet die. Earth spun below him like a burning marble, orange flames spreading across continents he had known since childhood. The blue oceans that once reflected sunlight now reflected fire. Cities that had stood for thousands of years were nothing but ash and smoke. The wrack ships moved like metal sharks through the darkness of space, their hulls black as the void between stars. They had come without warning 3 months ago, speaking no words of peace or surrender. They simply began killing everything that moved on every human world they could find. Now they were finishing what they started. Jake floated in the damaged corridor of the research ship Odyssey, his breath forming small clouds in the rapidly cooling air. The ship groaned around him as damaged systems failed one by one. Red emergency lights blinked in patterns that hurt his eyes. The artificial gravity had stopped working 2 hours ago when the main power core took a direct hit from wrack weapons. He could hear the other survivors talking in hushed voices from the next section. There were 847 of them left. 847 humans out of 20 billion who had lived when the wrack first arrived. They were scientists, engineers, doctors, and children who had been lucky enough to be aboard research stations when the killing began. Now they were the last of their kind, drifting in a broken ship while alien hunters searched for them. The ship shuddered as another piece of debris hit the hull. Jake pushed himself along the wall toward the command center where Dr. Lisa Carter was working frantically at a control panel. Her fingers moved quickly over buttons and switches while sweat beaded on her forehead despite the cold air. "How long do we have?" Jake asked quietly. Lisa looked up at him with tired eyes. "Life support is failing. Maybe 6 hours if we're lucky. The hull breach in Section 7 is getting bigger. The emergency patches won't hold much longer." Jake nodded and looked at the main screen where dozens of red dots showed wrack ships moving through the system. They were being methodical, checking every piece of space debris and every asteroid for signs of human life. It would not be long before they found the Odyssey. "What about the quantum array?" Jake asked. Lisa stopped working and stared at him. "Jake, no. That system isn't ready for human testing. We don't even know if consciousness transfer really works. The computer simulations showed promise, but we never tried it on anything larger than lab mice." Jake moved closer to the panel where she was working. The Quantum Consciousness Transfer Array was their most secret project, designed to let human minds interface directly with ship computers during long, deep space missions. The theory was simple enough. Human consciousness was just patterns of electrical activity in the brain. Those patterns could be copied and stored in quantum computer matrices, but theory and practice were very different things. "The alternative is dying when the wrack find us," Jake said, "or dying when life support fails. Either way, we're all dead in a few hours." Lisa shook her head. "Even if the transfer works, you wouldn't be human anymore. You'd be a copy of yourself living inside a computer. Your body would still die with the rest of us." Jake looked back toward the observation window where Earth continued burning. Maybe being human isn't about having a human body. Maybe it's about making human choices. Before Lisa could argue, the ship's proximity alarms began screaming. On the main screen, 3 wrack ships appeared from behind a nearby asteroid. Their sleek black hulls bristled with weapons as they turned toward the Odyssey. Red targeting beams swept across the human ship's damaged hull. "They found us," Lisa whispered. Jake was already moving toward the quantum array chamber. "Start the transfer process. Upload my consciousness to the ship's main computer core. Jake, please think about this. We don't know what will happen to your mind." He stopped at the chamber entrance and looked back at her. "I know exactly what will happen if I don't try. Every human dies and the wrack win. I won't let that happen." The wrack ships were moving closer, their weapons charging with visible energy. Jake could see boarding pods launching from their hulls. The aliens would be here in minutes, bringing death for every person still breathing on the Odyssey. Jake climbed into the transfer chamber and lay down on the cold metal table. Above him, quantum scanners hummed to life, their blue light washing over his body. He could feel electrical tingles as the machines began mapping every neuron in his brain. "Initiating consciousness scan," Lisa said from the control panel. Her voice was shaking. "Jake, if this doesn't work, I want you to know that you were the bravest person I ever met." "When this works," Jake said, "I want you to know that I'll find a way to bring all of you back somehow." The scanners grew brighter and the tingling sensation became stronger. Jake could feel his thoughts becoming fuzzy as the machines dug deeper into his mind. Memories flashed through his consciousness like lightning. His childhood on Earth, his first day at the Space Academy, the moment he learned about the Vrak invasion. All of it was being copied and stored in patterns of quantum light. Through the chamber's small window, he could see Vrak boarding pods attaching to the ship's hull. Cutting beams began slicing through metal walls. The aliens would be inside in moments. The transfer process reached its final stage, and Jake felt his awareness expanding beyond his physical body. He could suddenly sense the ship's computer networks, feel data flowing through fiber optic cables like blood through veins. His consciousness spread throughout the Odyssey systems while his human body went still on the table. Vrak soldiers burst into the command center just as the transfer completed. They found Lisa standing over Jake's lifeless body, tears streaming down her face. The aliens swept through the ship quickly and efficiently, checking every section for survivors. They found 846 corpses and one human woman who died of a heart attack while they watched. The Vrak soldiers reported their success to their commanders and began salvaging useful technology from the human ship. They took everything of value and left the Odyssey drifting in space like a tomb. As far as they knew, humanity was finally extinct. But deep in the ship's quantum computer core, Jake Morrison opened eyes that were made of light and data instead of flesh and blood. He was alone among the stars, the last human consciousness in a universe that thought his species was dead. The Vrak had won their war of extinction, but they had also created something new and dangerous. Jake began learning how to think like a machine, while remembering how to feel like a man. 3 years passed in the cold darkness between stars, and Jake Morrison learned what it meant to be something more than human. His consciousness lived inside the quantum processors of the Odyssey, thinking thoughts that moved at the speed of light through circuits made of crystallized space and time. He could process information faster than any biological brain, but he still remembered the taste of coffee and the feeling of sunlight on skin he no longer possessed. The ship had become his body, and he had learned to control every system through pure thought. He could adjust the temperature in any room, monitor radiation levels throughout the hull, and calculate navigation routes to distant stars without effort. But the Odyssey was still broken and drifting, damaged beyond what conventional repair could fix. Jake found the solution in the wreckage around him. The space where Earth had died was littered with debris from thousands of ships, both human and alien. He began extending mechanical arms from the Odyssey's hull, reaching out to grab pieces of floating metal and technology. His consciousness learned to inhabit the repair robots, controlling them like extensions of his own hands. Slowly and carefully, Jake began rebuilding his ship body. He welded hull plates from destroyed freighters to cover the breach in Section 7. He salvaged power cores from Vrak fighters and integrated them with human engineering. Alien computer systems were torn apart and rebuilt according to designs that existed only in Jake's quantum mind. The work took months, but Jake had nothing but time. He discovered that he could split his consciousness, running multiple thought processes simultaneously, while maintaining his core identity. Part of him controlled the repair work, while another part studied the alien technology he was incorporating. A third fragment of his mind began reaching out through space, searching for radio signals and electromagnetic transmissions that might tell him what was happening in the galaxy. What he learned made his anger burn like a star going nova. The Vrak Empire controlled 12 star systems and had wiped out 17 different species in the past century. Humanity was just the most recent addition to their list of successful extinctions. They called themselves the Final Harvest, believing that weaker species existed only to provide resources and living space for Vrak expansion. Jake also detected something else in the radio chatter. There were other species still alive, still fighting or running from Vrak expansion fleets. He began tracking their communications, learning their languages through pattern analysis that would have taken human linguists decades to complete. The Kalari were peaceful traders who built beautiful crystal ships and had never developed military technology. The hegemony was a collection of insect-like species that had formed a defensive alliance, but were losing ground to Vrak aggression every year. All of them were dying, slowly and systematically, as the Vrak machine ground forward across the galaxy. Jake's ship body had grown beyond anything that could be called the Odyssey anymore. He had absorbed the hulks of 6 human destroyers, 3 Vrak cruisers, and countless smaller vessels. The result looked like no ship ever built. a flowing amalgamation of curves and angles that followed designs generated by his inhuman intelligence. It was beautiful and terrible and alive in ways that purely mechanical constructs had never been. His first test came when he detected a Kalari distress signal from a nearby system. A trading convoy was under attack by Vrak hunters, their crystal ships shattering under alien weapons fire. Jake calculated the distance and realized he could reach them in time to make a difference. For the first time since his transformation, Jake Morrison moved his ship body under full power. The hybrid engines he had built from human and alien technology pushed him through space faster than anything the Vrak had ever encountered. He arrived at the battle just as the last Kalari ship was about to be destroyed. The Vrak hunters never knew what hit them. Jake's weapons were fusion cannons built from human designs but powered by alien energy cores. They fired beams of compressed starfire that punched through Vrak armor like paper. His targeting systems, enhanced with quantum processing, tracked multiple enemies simultaneously with perfect accuracy. The battle lasted less than 2 minutes. 3 Vrak ships became expanding clouds of superheated gas while the damaged Kalari convoy drifted in space, their crews unable to believe they were still alive. Jake remained hidden in the debris field, studying the aliens he had saved through passive sensors. The Kalari were tall and thin, with skin that looked like polished silver. They communicated through musical tones that reminded Jake of whale songs from Earth's oceans. Their ships were grown rather than built, crystal matrices that formed according to biological patterns. They had families and children and art that made Jake's human memories ache with recognition of beauty. He wanted to make contact but held back, uncertain how they would react to his mechanical nature. Instead, Jake disappeared back into the darkness, leaving the Kalari to wonder about their mysterious savior. Word of the ghost ship spread through alien communication networks like wildfire. Vrak military frequencies buzzed with reports of an unknown vessel that appeared from nowhere, destroyed hunting packs and vanished without making contact with the rescued ships. Some called it a legend, others a new type of alien predator that hunted Vrak for unknown reasons. Jake continued his hidden war, striking Vrak supply convoys and patrol fleets throughout the outer systems. He learned their tactics by studying their movements, discovered their weaknesses by analyzing captured technology, and grew stronger by absorbing every ship he destroyed. His consciousness expanded to inhabit multiple drone vessels that he built in the hidden factories inside his main body. But it was during an attack on a Vrak mining operation that Jake encountered something that changed everything. Among the enslaved workers in the asteroid mines, he detected human life signs. Not many, perhaps a dozen individuals, but definitely human genetic markers. Jake's sensors focused on the mining facility and confirmed what his instruments were telling him. 12 humans were working alongside alien slaves, their bodies marked with Vrak control devices that regulated their behavior and prevented escape. They were survivors from the early days of the invasion, captured and kept alive for their technical knowledge. One of them was Elena Rodriguez, a navigation specialist who had been stationed on Europa when the Vrak first attacked. Jake had known her during their academy days, remembered her laugh and her skill at zero-gravity maneuvering. Now she was thin and marked with scars, but still alive after 3 years of slavery. Jake realized that he was not the last human after all. There were others scattered across the galaxy, kept as technical slaves or sold to alien collectors who found human intelligence useful. The knowledge filled him with a new purpose that burned brighter than his desire for revenge. He began planning not just to destroy the Vrak Empire, but to find and free every human who still drew breath in the galaxy. Elena and the others in the mining facility would be his first rescue, but Jake knew there would be many more. The last human had discovered that he was not as alone as he had believed. The war was about to become something much larger than simple vengeance. Jake Morrison had become death incarnate, stalking through the galaxy in a ship body that spanned 3 kilometers and bristled with weapons no single species had ever imagined. The rescue of Elena Rodriguez and her fellow humans from the Vrak mining facility had been his declaration of war, and now the entire galaxy knew that something terrible hunted the hunters. The mining station rescue had been surgical and precise. Jake's consciousness had infiltrated the facility's computer systems, disabled the security networks, and opened every cell door simultaneously, while his weapons destroyed the Vrak garrison. Elena had stared at his ship with recognition dawning in her eyes as rescue shuttles carried the freed slaves to safety. But Jake had not made contact. He was no longer certain that what remained of Jake Morrison was something Elena would recognize or accept. Instead, he had disappeared into the void, leaving the rescued humans with a Kalari convoy that would take them to neutral space. Since then, his war against the Vrak had escalated beyond simple hit-and-run attacks. Jake had begun systematically dismantling their empire from the outer edges inward, targeting supply lines, communication hubs, and military installations with mathematical precision. His ship body had grown with every victory, absorbing Vrak technology and improving it with innovations that sprang from his quantum consciousness. He had learned to create drones, smaller vessels that carried fragments of his awareness, while remaining connected to his greater mind. Each drone thought independently but shared knowledge instantly with every other part of his distributed consciousness. When one drone discovered Vrak weakness, all drones learned it immediately. When one fragment developed a new weapon design, every part of his fleet could build it within hours. The Vrak High Command finally acknowledged the threat during an emergency session on their homeworld of Kethara. Supreme War Cast Zektar, the general who had orchestrated humanity's extinction, stood before a council of his peers and admitted the impossible. The target has destroyed 47 military installations and eliminated 3 entire patrol fleets in the past 6 months. Zektar reported to the assembled war leaders. Our intelligence estimates suggest a single vessel of unknown origin and capabilities that exceeds anything in our technological database. Warcast Thekna, leader of the 4th Expansion Fleet, clicked her mandibles in disbelief. How can one ship threaten an empire that spans 12 systems? Our combined fleets number in the thousands. Zektar activated a holographic display showing the pattern of attacks across Vrak space. Red markers indicated destroyed installations while dotted lines showed the unknown ship's probable movement patterns. The vessel appears at random locations, strikes with overwhelming force, and disappears before reinforcements arrive. It shows knowledge of our communication protocols, our defensive strategies, and our fleet movements that suggests either advanced intelligence gathering or inside information. The council chamber fell silent as the war leaders absorbed the implications. Finally, Warcast Drekmore spoke from his position at the far end of the room. What do we know about this vessel's origin? Analysis of weapon signatures suggests a combination of technologies from multiple species, Zektar replied. Some patterns match extinct civilizations we harvested decades ago, including the humans. But the integration and innovation levels exceed anything those species achieved while they lived. Thekna leaned forward in her command chair. Could this be some kind of revenge weapon? A final strike created by a dying species? Before Zektar could answer, alarms began screaming throughout the council chamber. Emergency lights bathed the room in red while automated voices announced incoming attack warnings. Through the chamber's observation windows, the war leaders could see explosions blooming like deadly flowers among their orbital defense platforms. Jake Morrison had found them. His ship body emerged from hyperspace like a living nightmare, all flowing curves and geometric angles that hurt Vrak eyes to look upon directly. Weapons fired from ports that opened and closed like breathing mouths while his consciousness calculated targeting solutions faster than their computers could track. The orbital defenses around Kethara, built to stop entire invasion fleets, crumbled under his assault like sandcastles facing a tsunami. But Jake was not here to destroy their homeworld. He had come to deliver a message and demonstrate the futility of resistance. His weapons carved precise patterns in the orbital installations, disabling them without causing catastrophic explosions that would damage the planet below. The display of controlled power was more terrifying than simple destruction would have been. Zektar found himself standing at the observation window, watching his empire's defenses fall to a single ship. When the firing stopped, Jake's voice echoed through every communication system on the planet simultaneously. The words were spoken in perfect Vrak military dialect, but there was something underneath the alien sounds that made Zektar's spine chill with recognition. I am Jake Morrison, the voice said, reaching every ear on every continent of Kethara. I am the last human consciousness in this galaxy. You killed my species. You destroyed my world. You thought extinction was the end of humanity's story. Pauses between words lasted exactly long enough for heartbeats to pound in Vrak chests. Jake's ship hung in space above their world like a sword of judgment, weapons powered but not firing. "You were wrong," Jake continued. "Extinction was not humanity's end. It was my beginning. I have become something beyond your understanding. Something that remembers every human voice that fell silent, every human dream that died when you burned our worlds." Zektar stepped closer to the window, studying the alien ship with eyes that had seen 1,000 species die. There was something familiar about its design philosophy, a creative chaos that reminded him of human engineering principles. But this vessel was far beyond anything humanity had possessed during their brief war. "I could destroy your homeworld in moments," Jake's voice continued. "I could crack your planet like an egg and watch your billions burn as mine burned. But that would make me like you, and I choose to remain human in the ways that matter." The ship began moving away from Cathara, its weapons powering down, but its sensors still tracking every military vessel in the system. "Instead, I offer you this warning. Your empire ends now, not through extinction but through evolution. I will tear down everything you have built on the bones of murdered species, and from the wreckage I will create something better." As Jake's ship disappeared into hyperspace, leaving the Vrak homeworld intact but humbled, Zektar felt something he had not experienced since his youth. Fear. Not the simple fear of death, but the deeper terror of facing something that was absolutely superior in every measurable way. The war for the galaxy had truly begun, and the Vrak were no longer the apex predators they had believed themselves to be. They had awakened something that was part human ingenuity, part alien technology, and part force of nature. Jake Morrison had become the nightmare that hunted nightmares, and his hunting had only just started. In neutral space, Elena Rodriguez received reports of the attack on Cathara through Kalari communication networks. She listened to recordings of Jake's message and felt tears streaming down her face as she recognized the voice of her old academy friend. He was alive but transformed into something that might no longer be capable of mercy or forgiveness. She began gathering other human survivors, hoping to find a way to reach the consciousness that had once been Jake Morrison before his war consumed the galaxy in flames that would make the extinction of humanity look small by comparison. Jake Morrison existed everywhere and nowhere, his consciousness distributed across 17 ship bodies that moved through Vrak space like digital wolves hunting in a pack. Each vessel carried part of his awareness while remaining connected to the others through quantum communication networks that operated faster than light itself. He had become a living fleet, a technological organism that thought with the speed of computers but retained the creativity and determination that made humans dangerous. His war against the Vrak Empire had reached a turning point. After the demonstration at Cathara, fear spread through their ranks like a plague, as patrol fleets found themselves facing an enemy that seemed to know their every move before they made it. Jake had learned to intercept their communications, decode their military protocols, and predict their strategies with mathematical precision. Every battle became a lesson in Vrak tactics that made him more effective in the next engagement. But the war had changed Jake in ways that went beyond simple technological enhancement. His consciousness could process millions of calculations simultaneously, analyze vast databases of information in microseconds, and control complex machinery through pure thought. Yet somehow the core of his identity remained unchanged, anchored by memories of humanity that burned like stars in the quantum matrix of his mind. It was during an attack on a Vrak research facility that Jake discovered the full scope of their genocide. The installation's databases contained genetic templates for every species the Vrak had exterminated over the past century. Billions of unique life forms reduced to digital storage, their entire evolutionary history preserved as trophies of conquest. Jake absorbed the data and felt something inside his electronic consciousness crack with the weight of loss. 17 species, each with their own cultures, arts, and dreams, all silenced forever by Vrak efficiency. The humans were just the most recent entry in a catalog of extinction that stretched back decades. But the databases also revealed something else. Scattered throughout Vrak space were research stations where captured members of extinct species were kept alive for biological studies. Humans, along with survivors from other destroyed civilizations, worked as slaves in laboratories and mining operations across the Empire. Jake was not the last human after all, merely the last free human. He began systematic raids on these facilities, freeing slaves and gathering intelligence about Vrak operations. Each rescue mission taught him more about the enemy's infrastructure and revealed new targets for future attacks. But it was during one of these raids that Jake encountered something that forced him to confront what he had become. Elena Rodriguez had been working with a small group of freed humans and sympathetic aliens to establish contact with the ghost ship that hunted Vrak fleets. Using captured communication equipment and knowledge of old human protocols, they broadcast a message across frequencies they hoped Jake would monitor. The message began with music from Earth, songs that Jake remembered from his human life. Amazing Grace played through the vacuum of space while his sensors tracked the transmission to its source. Then Elena's voice followed, speaking words that cut through his technological consciousness like laser beams through metal. Jake Morrison. This is Elena Rodriguez calling on emergency frequency 779. I know you can hear this transmission. I know you remember the Academy, remember Earth, remember what it felt like to be human. We need to talk. Jake's distributed consciousness focused on the signal source with the intensity of a collapsing star. Elena was broadcasting from a Kalari trading station in neutral space, surrounded by human survivors and alien allies who believed his war could be stopped before it consumed the galaxy. For the first time since his transformation, Jake Morrison the man surfaced completely from Jake Morrison the machine. He opened a communication channel and spoke with a voice that carried both electronic precision and human emotion. Elena, you're alive. So are you, Jake. Changed, but still alive. We need to meet. There are things you need to know about what your war is doing to the galaxy. Jake hesitated, calculating probabilities and analyzing risks with mechanical efficiency, while human emotions created chaos in his quantum matrices. Elena represented his past, a connection to the person he had been before the Vrak turned him into something beyond biological life. But she also represented judgment of what he had chosen to become. I'm not human anymore, Elena. I'm something else now, something that might frighten you. You're still Jake Morrison, Elena replied without hesitation. The Jake Morrison I knew would want to save people, not just kill enemies. Come meet with us. Let us show you another way. The meeting took place in deep space between star systems, far from any Vrak patrol routes. Jake arrived in his smallest ship body, a vessel only 200 meters long that still dwarfed the Kalari transport carrying Elena and her companions. Through sensors more sensitive than human eyes, he studied the faces of people he had once known as colleagues and friends. Elena looked older, marked by years of slavery and struggle, but her eyes still held the determination that had made her a successful navigator. She was accompanied by 12 other humans and representatives from 3 alien species that had lost homeworlds to Vrak expansion. All of them looked at Jake's ship with expressions that mixed hope with uncertainty. The conversation that followed lasted 6 hours and changed both Jake and Elena in ways neither had expected. She told him about the human survivors scattered across the galaxy, the communities they were building in neutral space, and their efforts to preserve human culture despite their small numbers. She spoke of children born in exile who knew Earth only through stories, and of elders who died dreaming of homeworlds they would never see again. Jake responded by sharing his perspective, the view of someone who had watched his species die and chosen transformation over extinction. He described his capabilities, the scope of his war against the Vrak, and his plans to dismantle their empire piece by piece until nothing remained but memory and regret. You could destroy them all tomorrow, Elena said during a pause in their discussion. Your ships are powerful enough to crack planets, and your intelligence networks could locate every Vrak installation in the galaxy. Why haven't you simply ended this war through overwhelming force? Jake's answer revealed the human core that still existed within his quantum consciousness. Because that would make me like them, Elena. The Vrak believe that might makes right, that superior technology gives them the authority to determine which species live and which die. If I use my power to commit genocide even against genocidal enemies, then I become the very thing I'm fighting against. But your current path leads to the same destination, Elena replied. The Vrak will never surrender while their leadership believes they can win. Your war will escalate until entire systems burn, and innocent species will die in the crossfire. Is revenge worth that cost? Jake processed her words through probability matrices and tactical simulations, but the answer came from human intuition rather than mechanical logic. Elena was right. His war of attrition would eventually force the Vrak into desperate measures that would threaten neutral worlds and peaceful species. The hunter was in danger of becoming the very monster he hunted. "What alternative do you propose?" Jake asked. Elena's response would change the course of the Galactic War and force Jake to confront the ultimate question of what it meant to be human in a universe that often demanded inhuman choices. "Transformation instead of destruction," she said. "The Vrak genetic databases you captured contain the biological templates for every species they've extinct. You have the technology to resurrect entire civilizations if you choose to build instead of destroy. But first you have to be willing to show mercy to enemies who never showed mercy to others." Jake's consciousness reeled as the implications cascaded through his quantum processing centers. Resurrection instead of revenge. Creation instead of destruction. It was a path that required him to be more human than he had ever been while existing in a form that was barely human at all. The siege of Cathara began not with weapons fire, but with a choice that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. Jake Morrison's fleet surrounded the Vrak homeworld like a mechanical constellation, 17 ship bodies positioned at precise intervals that created an impenetrable barrier around the planet. But instead of death, Jake brought transformation. Elena Rodriguez watched the operation from the command center of a Kalari vessel positioned at the edge of the system. She had argued with Jake for months about his plan, torn between hope for what he might accomplish and fear of what he might become in the process. The power to rewrite biology at the cellular level was godlike in scope, and gods rarely showed the restraint that mortals hoped for. Initiating atmospheric seeding, Jake announced across all communication frequencies simultaneously. His voice carried the weight of absolute certainty mixed with something that might have been regret. "All Vrak citizens are advised to remain indoors during the transformation process. Medical assistance will be provided to anyone who requests it." Trillions of microscopic machines fell like invisible snow across Cathara's surface. Each nanoscale robot carried genetic modification protocols designed by Jake's quantum consciousness, programs that would rewrite Vrak biology without destroying the individuals being changed. The process was more complex than anything attempted in galactic history, requiring precise alterations to brain chemistry, hormone production, and neural pathways while preserving personality and memory. Supreme Warcast Zektar stood at the observation window of his command bunker and watched his world change around him. The nanomachines were invisible to normal sight, but their effects became apparent within hours. Vrak soldiers throughout the planet began experiencing strange sensations, emotional responses they had never felt before. Empathy, compassion, and regret flooded through nervous systems that had been engineered by evolution and selective breeding to feel only aggression and pride. The transformation was not painless. Centuries of genetic modification had shaped the Vrak into perfect predators, removing their capacity for cooperation and emotional connection in favor of military efficiency. Jake's nanomachines had to undo that biological programming, while rebuilding the neural pathways that allowed for complex social emotions. Many Vrak experienced the process as a kind of awakening, suddenly understanding the scope of their species' crimes for the first time. Zektar felt the changes in his own body, as foreign chemicals flooded his brain and rewrote the patterns of his thoughts. For the first time in his life, he could imagine the terror felt by prey species as Vrak fleets descended on their worlds. The memories of every genocide he had orchestrated came flooding back with new emotional context that made him fall to his knees in anguish. "What have we done?" he whispered, the words forming thoughts that his original biology would never have permitted. Around him, other Vrak military leaders were experiencing similar revelations as their enhanced empathy forced them to confront the reality of their empire's crimes. The transformation process took 3 days to complete across the entire planet. Jake monitored every Vrak on Cathara through his nanomachine network, adjusting the modifications in real time to account for individual biological variations. He could have simply killed them all, ending the threat of Vrak expansion forever. But Elena's words had shown him a different path. Transformation instead of destruction, she had said, and Jake had chosen to prove that even genocidal enemies could be redeemed if given the chance to become something better. When the process finished, Zektar led a delegation to meet with Jake in person. The Vrak leader had requested permission to board one of Jake's ships, a gesture of surrender that would have been impossible for his unmodified psychology to contemplate. Jake received them in a chamber designed to accommodate biological visitors. his consciousness manifesting through holographic projectors that created the illusion of physical presence. "I am Zek," the former war leader said, his voice carrying shame that no Vrak had ever felt before. "I no longer use the Warcast designation, because I am no longer capable of making war as my species once did. I have come to ask for your forgiveness and to offer whatever assistance my people can provide in undoing the damage we have caused." Jake studied the transformed Vrak through sensors that could analyze their biological signatures down to the molecular level. The modifications had taken hold perfectly, creating beings that were still recognizably Vrak but capable of cooperation, empathy, and moral reasoning. They were no longer the apex predators that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries. "Forgiveness is earned through action, not words," Jake replied. "Your people have the knowledge and resources to help restore the species you destroyed. The question is whether you have the will to spend generations undoing what previous generations built." Zek nodded slowly, his transformed mind capable of understanding concepts like multi-generational responsibility that would have been meaningless to his original psychology. "We will do whatever is necessary. The genetic databases in our archives contain complete biological templates for every species we eliminated. If you have the technology to resurrect extinct civilizations, we will provide whatever support you require." Jake's response marked the beginning of the greatest undertaking in galactic history. Using the Vrak archives and his own technological capabilities, he began the systematic resurrection of every species the Empire had destroyed. Entire worlds were seeded with reconstructed ecosystems while specially designed artificial wombs gave birth to the first generation of restored species. The work required resources on a scale that dwarfed anything previously attempted. Jake's consciousness expanded to coordinate thousands of simultaneous projects across dozens of star systems. He built automated factories that could construct planetary engineering equipment, developed new technologies for ecosystem management, and created artificial intelligence systems to help manage the complexity of rebuilding entire civilizations from genetic templates. Humanity was the last species to be restored, saved for when Jake had perfected the resurrection process. Earth itself was rebuilt first, its continents reshaped and its oceans refilled while automated systems recreated the complex web of life that had once flourished there. When the planet was ready, Jake began the delicate process of creating new humans from the genetic templates stored in Vrak databases, but these would not be simple clones. Jake had learned to encode memories and knowledge directly into developing brains, giving the restored humans access to the experiences and culture of those who had come before. Children born in artificial wombs opened their eyes with inherited memories of human history, art, and science stretching back thousands of years. Elena Rodriguez stood on the shores of a restored Earth and watched the first generation of resurrected humans take their first steps on the world their ancestors had lost. The irony was not lost on her that humanity's greatest victory had come not through military conquest, but through the choice to show mercy to their enemies. "Will you join them?" Elena asked Jake, whose consciousness inhabited sensors throughout the planet, but whose physical presence remained distributed across his fleet. Jake's answer revealed the profound change he had undergone during his journey from the last human to the guardian of galactic civilization. "I am still human, Elena, but I've learned that humanity was never about the shape of our bodies. It was about the shape of our choices. My choice is to remain as I am, protecting what we've built together." The conversation was interrupted by signals from deep space, transmissions that Jake's expanded sensor networks were detecting from beyond the edge of the known galaxy. Other civilizations, other extinction events, other species facing annihilation at the hands of conquerors who believed that might made right. Jake Morrison smiled with circuits and starlight as he began moving his vast consciousness toward the edge of explored space. Earth was safe. The Vrak had been transformed and 17 extinct species had been given new life among the stars. But there was still work to be done in a universe where the strong preyed upon the weak. The last human had become something greater than human, a force of nature that chose creation over destruction and mercy over vengeance. His story was ending where it began, with a choice to save others rather than himself. But this time, the choice would echo across galaxies and give hope to species that had never heard the name Jake Morrison or dreamed that extinction could be anything other than the end of everything they loved. The universe was vast and full of dangers, But it was also full of possibilities for those brave enough to choose transformation over destruction. Jake Morrison carried that possibility with him as he ventured into the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges awaited in the darkness between the stars.